obviously the FRM makes a fairly big deal about the capital asset pricing model. Chapter 14 on portfolio construction, not quite to the aims, but rather just some of the setup, because we have a chapter that's assigned and it relies on some of the reading chapters in the Grinold book before it. So Grinold's a difficult book, and it's hard to just jump right into the chapter 14 that's assigned. So I consider this assignment fairly odd, just like I consider the CAPM assignment fairly odd. But a basic idea in Grinold here is this formula here, where the expected return of the security is going to be the function of this familiar linear model. You'll notice we've got a risk-free rate. I always use the notation of the assignment. So normally I'd prefer to use R sub F to connote the risk-free rate, because we're familiar with that. But the authors here use a risk-free rate. So that's pretty common in terms of our linear multi-factor models. And then they've got a beta times here mu of B, which in their language borrows from CAPM. So if you just stop right here, you can notice how we're pretty much at the CAPM. And so what their Grinold is doing is basically extending the CAPM into a multi-factor CAPM and APT model as the basis for attributing the returns. So here we've got the risk premium, exposure to a factor, and then it's just that it's broken out with an additional term that they call the exceptional benchmark return. So that's the difference between the expected excess return on the benchmark in the near future and the long run expected excess return. So we could think about this as a timing factor. If without it, maybe we have really sort of a long run CAPM. But the idea here is, well, maybe if that CAPM is informed by an exposure to a risk factor, a risk premium that's more long term in nature, maybe in the near term, in the next year, there will be something an abnormal or an excess, and we capture that in its own factor. And then alpha, the expected residual return. So we've got the alpha. Now the alpha is important, is significant in these multi-factor CAPM or APT models. Because in the ex post regression, the alpha is the intercept. And so that's generally, if I could be superficial for a moment, we'll generally say that when regressing excess returns against either just the market excess return as under a single factor CAPM or under a multi-factor model, we regress, and then the intercept, if we think about that in regression terms, univariate or multivariate, it's going to be the component that is not explained by exposure to the other common factors. So that alpha, that's going to be what we think of as hedge fund alpha. So alpha, unless there's something more specific or some caveats associated with it, we can generally think of alpha as the regression intercept, or more specifically, the intercept on the regression of portfolio returns against the selected common factors, whatever they are, even if they're only the single factor in the CAPM. And so the other